as unprecedented fires continue to rage across Southern California, the liberal politicians in this state say, don't blame us. And if you do, you're the problem. Coming up, I'll give you the 5 reasons why we absolutely should be holding California liberal politicians accountable for the disastrous fires. I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California and a California state representative representing District 75 in the state legislature. It is horrific what we're witnessing on TV, the images of fires raging out of control. And it has been several days. And our thoughts and prayers are with all of those that are in harm's way, all of those who are victims who have lost treasured memories, all of their belongings. And it's been quite a traumatic experience. Now, I will say right up front that the focus right now ought to remain on helping people evacuate, helping people get to safety. However, it is absolutely also appropriate to be documenting, calling out, and questioning failures of our government and demanding answers and action from our politicians. But these politicians right now say that if you raise any criticism, that somehow you're politicizing a disaster, that somehow you're at fault, you're a problem. How dare you question us? Well, it's called accountability, honey. And I believe that there are 5 reasons why California politicians are partly to blame, significantly to blame, for the level of this emergency and the fact that it got so quickly out of control. I'll go through those 5 in just a moment, but let me share with you the umbrage, the anger that politicians are expressing that you would dare question them. Now, President Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, although both are correct, he called out California politicians for their ineptitude and incompetence in dealing with this emergency. California Governor Gavin Newsom, to his credit, is on site in Southern California. He was asked by CNN's Anderson Cooper about the president's criticism, and this is what he had to say. I want to share it with you.
Public safety face. I hate to even ask this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this. One can't even respond to it. I mean, people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it.
Wait, hold on a second. For all those reasons, you absolutely damn right we ought to be asking questions of politicians and pointing out already the documented failures. And that's not politicizing a situation. That's saying that, look, we have an emergency here, and a lot of emergencies cannot be prevented. A lot of natural disasters happen, but how we prepare for them, how we respond to them moment by moment absolutely is fair game and important to question. The reason why Newsom doesn't want anyone to ask questions or criticize at this point is because he knows that he is culpable. And by the way, Gavin Newsom is the king of politicizing tragedy. I mean, come on, take a look at this. Newsom, anytime there is a shooting, comes out and blames Republicans. Oh, you haven't done enough to enact gun control, and that's why we need to do X, Y, and Z. This latest one was, you just type in gun, mass shooting, Gavin Newsom response into any search engine, and you'll get crap like this that pops up within seconds. I think he's got a statement ready on call. So, bitch, please don't complain when people start pointing out questions of failures and demanding answers and identifying ways that you coulda, shoulda done better. Now, the Los Angeles mayor is also getting criticism, rightfully so. She was warned about the dry fire conditions, the oncoming projected Santa Ana winds, how the situation was an emergency. As a state legislator, by the way, I received notices from my local utility company. I'm on a text chain with other legislators representing Southern California. and they keep us up to speed about weather conditions and their steps to turn off power in certain areas that they find to be high risk. I knew about these warnings on Saturday and Sunday. But on Tuesday morning, the Los Angeles mayor, despite the fact that she was warned that there were serious risks in her community, she jumped on a plane to fly to Africa, to go to Ghana. Apparently, it was more important for her to go there and hobnob with Lord knows who than to be in her own city. And people say, well, there's travel. She didn't know what was going to happen. Again, bitch, please. Your city, Miss Mayor, is a complete dumpster fire 365 days a year. You've got a crime wave. You got a homeless epidemic. You've got the highest cost of living. You have absolutely an emergency on your hands in terms of the poor quality of living and the poor conditions that you've subjected Los Angeles residents to 365 days a year. Why is it that Ghana needs more of your attention than your own failing city? Now, when asked, this was her response. She's on a jet bridge waiting to get on an airplane, and someone's got a cell phone asking her questions.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today?
This is not a deep fake. She literally has nothing to say. The questions that are being asked are very legitimate questions. And if she had a response, she'd give one. If she cared to give you a response, she would give one. I don't think she has any concern about either one of those. I don't think that she has a response. She can't defend her bad behavior. And second, she doesn't give a rip what criticism people level at her. She doesn't care. She's a Democrat. She's in charge of a deep blue city. No one's going to challenge her. She's an elitist. She doesn't have to answer questions. She stares straight forward like some statue, a mannequin in a department store that's been overrun with a bunch of smash and grabbers. These people are not accountable. Gavin Newsom should give us a response. He says, I don't even know. How do I even begin to respond? Respond. Trump says that you didn't have enough water. Trump says that you were not prepared. What is your response? So, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about your response because I think I got the receipts. There are 5 reasons why it is absolutely reasonable and important to hold California politicians accountable for the disaster, the level of the disaster. Now, I don't blame them for Santa Ana winds, although they will blame you, saying, you caused it because of climate change. You've got to get rid of your car. It's all your fault. They literally will say that you're at fault for climate change, and that anyone who doesn't agree with their Green New Deal, high cost, fewer jobs, fewer convenience, and yes, even as we've pointed out on this podcast, worsened environmental conditions. If you don't agree with their extremist policies on the environment, that somehow you're to blame when tragedies come up. So they play the blame game all the time, and you'll hear that in the next several days and weeks, that it was all climate change's fault. You know, we were just victims of climate change, and that we've got to get rid of carbon-based fuels. That's what they're going to say. All right. But these 5 things that I'm going to go through, I think, show their culpability. It's not just the weather. It is a failure of government. First and foremost, I would argue that the first reason why we can blame politicians is that they have put California and Los Angeles, as I referenced, into an emergency situation 365 days a year. And so when you are a mismanaged state like California is, when you are a mismanaged city like Los Angeles, every single day of the year, when an emergency does come up, and they do come up, we plan for emergencies. We should be prepared for emergencies. We don't want them, but they do happen, and we shouldn't be surprised when they happen. But when you are an absolute crap show, 365 days a year, inept, incompetent, and dealing with record homelessness, poverty, a crime wave, when you're dealing with all that stuff, you're not prepared when the emergency actually happens. And some of the other elements I'm going to talk about in this top 5 list highlight the fact that they were not prepared. They didn't do the things that they should have been doing. I mean, firefighters are completely overworked already in Los Angeles, just dealing with homelessness. Law enforcement, which is needed to help do traffic mitigation and evacuate people, they're overwhelmed 365 days a year dealing with the crime wave. And don't even get me started on the underfunding of infrastructure. So when you are mismanaging your city and your state 365, when an emergency comes up, you are not prepared. Second reason why we should blame them, brush management. We do know that even in LA, where it's an urban area, if you've ever been there, I've been there a lot, there are lots of canyons, lots of open space, even in the urban areas. And all these open areas have a lot of brush behind people's homes, on the slopes of the hills and the mountains. So it is a vegetation zone that needs to be properly managed. But California Environmental Quality Act and other regulations, both at the state and local level, prohibit and interfere with homeowners and, yes, even municipalities from doing clearing of defensible space. The goal is at least 30 feet. The ideal would be 100 feet of defensible space for these homes. Now, I used to be a San Diego City Council member, and I had to help my residents all the time when they were given roadblocks, bureaucratic nonsense, because of state regulations, state law, local incompetence when it comes to vegetation management. Joe Redden, a registered professional forester in California and retired forester in the U.S. Forest Service, told Fox Business that both federal and state policies can create roadblocks to property owners. Quote, the California Environmental Quality Act is quite laborious to get through to fruition, where you can actually put treatments on the ground. That is an understatement of the century. Not allowing for defensible space, brush management, is a failure of our state and local officials. The third reason why we can fail and blame politicians is their absolute incompetence when it comes to managing utilities. I'm talking about both electricity as well as water for the fire hydrants. And there's been a lot of misinformation on the fire hydrant issue, and I'm going to try to cover some of the misinformation and give you the facts in a balanced way. But first and foremost, we do know that the power was not shut off even when after the fire broke out, making it even more of a dangerous situation. Here is actual live footage from Fox 11 showing the sparks. Watch it right.
It's a tree. Hey, so just literally seconds ago, we heard a very loud boom, and it was a tree coming down, and it hit those power lines. You can see them sparking. We're trying to get away from them. This is a very, very dangerous situation that firefighters are dealing with, and there was actually an LAPD cruiser going through just as that tree came down, barely missed hitting it. And I want to pan this way and show you, we're actually at Antioch and Swarthmore, and there are buildings here on fire.
Well, how do you think those buildings got, caught on fire? Again, I do not have an investigation report, but I can tell you right now, those sparks from electric power lines, as branches are hitting them with the high wind, I would venture to guess a good number of fires were started by the electric utility grid not being properly shut down and managed during the incident. Also, let's talk about the water. Here's the LA Times. Fire hydrants ran dry as Pacific Palisades burned. LA city officials blame tremendous demand. Well, they're also negligent in not preparing the infrastructure and storing the water for an emergency. And let me just point out, as they sit there and say, oh, we couldn't have foreseen what happened here. They certainly could. Here is a briefing where the question is actually asked about the fire hydrants not working at certain levels of Pacific Palisades during the fire emergency.
Yeah, the DWP was talking about the problems with the water supply, and I was wondering if either the DWP or the fire department has any kind of numbers to talk about, like what is the number of hydrants that could not get water because of these pressure issues? What percentage of the system in Pacific Palisades wasn't getting serviced at that point? And given the type of things you're describing this morning, do you think there needs to be an overhaul of the system, given these increasing number of urban fires? And also, when does the mayor return?
Well, we talked about that already, the mayor. But again, these are good questions to be asking. But politicians like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, if you ask questions, you're the problem. No, you're not. In the middle of a disaster, that's when people's attention are on that function of government. That's the best time to hold these blank hats accountable for their failure and demand that they improve for the next time. You can't do anything about what's already happened. But the question needs to be asked when people are giving briefings. Okay, if you're not able to ask questions and call public officials out on the carpet and raise the question of blame in the middle of an emergency, why are they holding press conferences in the first place? I mean, they're just giving out information. No. They're holding a press conference, and we have to ask questions about what's going on. Why aren't we getting a response? What could be done better? And I want to know, does a public official have answers at the top of their tongue, at the top of their head as to what happened and what could be done to improve it in the future? Because if they don't in the middle of a disaster, when other things come up after the disaster and life returns to normal, they ain't going to be focused on it then. They are not going to be asked the questions because the public moves on. Now is the time to ask the questions and give the critique. And it's not inappropriate to be doing that.
And name and media outlet, please.
David Zahniser with the Los Angeles Times.
I love it how when they get asked a tough question, they ask, well, who's your media outlet? Because they may not answer the question if it's some random Joe Public, because Lord knows we don't have to answer to the public. But there's this silent portion where he says, I'm with the LA Times. When the liberal LA Times is asking questions and raising blame and holding people accountable, you done bad. So what was the response? Even in the response, it suggests that, yeah, things could have been done better. Listen in.
So, Chief, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we were trying to keep water at all altitudes on the Palisades, and I think about 3 a.m, that's when the hydrants went dry above the Brentwood area. We are able to push water on that trunk line on the east side of that, and we have some water on higher elevations, 16 to 18,000. But at 3,000, at 3 a.m., all of the fire hydrants went dry in the Palisades. To your question of
By
climate,
the way, initially a bunch of liberals said that it was not true, and now we've got confirmation.
Resiliency and how do we need to update
Wait,
the
what did she say? In terms of the question about what he asked, hey, how can we make sure that the water is available when we need it? What went wrong? How did she hear the question? She says climate resiliency. In terms of climate resiliency, you see how they're already trying to shift the blame from, hey, did you have enough water? And was there enough water in the storage? Did you pump enough water when you needed it for the emergency? Was the infrastructure properly maintained? These are the sorts of secondary and tertiary questions that this guy is really getting at. But no, she takes that question about did you have water in the hydrants and says, let's talk about climate change, climate resiliency. No, honey, it ain't about climate change. It's about, are you ready to do your job? Do you have water in the hydrant? Totally different question. You don't need to have a climate model in order to have water in a hydrant.
Climate resiliency and how do we need to update the system. I would say that is true. We were talking with the county supervisor and Mark on how are we going to change the way we operate our water.
Oh, so you're already talking about how can we change the way we operate the system. So there was a conversation prior to this press conference about how could we improve? How could we do better? Okay, my dear, everyone's listening. Can we hear about that conversation? Since you had a conversation, I just, in regards to your climate resiliency, in other words, how do we get water in the hydrants? We've been having those conversations about how we can improve. Do tell. So does that mean that there are things that you could have been doing all along? Since you've had a conversation even before you study it, like, oh yeah, hey golly, what could we do to improve? Well, let me tell you what we could do to improve. We knew that we were going to have fires. We've known. Isn't this the scary part of climate change that Newsom and everyone else continues to warn us about? If we don't get rid of our cars and get rid of air conditioning and pay the highest cost for electricity in the entire world, if you don't do all these bad things in the name of saving the environment, the fire could destroy you. So you know that these things are happening. And now you're saying, oh yeah, there's a bunch of things we could do to improve going forward. You should have done them by now. Because you didn't do them by now, I do consider your lack of preparedness to be part of the blame. Next, so we've got emergency 365 throughout the year, lack of brush management. Third was the inappropriate management of the electric utilities and the water in the hydrants. Let's talk about, oh, and by the way, I skipped over this. LA and power officials have these fat salaries as the hydrants are running dry. They continue to say, well, we don't have money for infrastructure to put more pipes and more hydrants out there. Oh, but you got all these massive salaries. You've got a load dispatcher, LA Department of Water and Power, taking home $857,458 last year in compensation, overtime, salary, and other pay. Ken McCrank, a local dispatcher, these are dispatchers, it's not like they're the CEO, made $787,000 in 2023. This is all according to Open the Books. Gary Caravu, an electrical services manager, raked in $782,000. How many fire hydrants would that buy? Curious, the public should know. Okay, so the fourth reason, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the fire department and other underfunding decisions by city politicians. We know that the fire department was studied for Los Angeles in 2013 by a group called Citygate. They're actually a national group that looks at staffing ratios to population, number of incidents, how many fire trucks and fire stations do you need, how many firefighters and what types of firefighters you need. Well, they basically came out saying in 2023 that in one fire station, Fire Station 9, East Downtown area, they responded to 18,986 incidents in the year 2020, an average of 52 a day. That's one every 30 minutes around the clock. The analysts concluded that well over 100 new non-firefighter personnel should be trained just to meet service needs throughout the city. So we do know that the Citygate report said that we needed more firefighters just to deal with the 365 days a year issues. But it gets worse. Instead of hiring firefighters in an efficient way, the fire department in LA has a DEI program. They just promoted a lesbian woman to the fire chief's position, and they made a bunch of hay out of that. Again, nothing wrong with that. But if you're failing at your core mission, then your DEI fetish is distracting you from doing the work that the public wants you to do. Well, here we've got in the fire department a cut in the budget last year by $17.6 million. But even though they cut the budget by $17.6 million overall, and that would fund a lot of firefighters, they spent $1 million on racial equity planning designed to end systemic, institutional, and structural racism within the fire department. Why don't we go out and save homes and lives? Maybe that should be your mission. Now, Adam Carolla said that he wanted to get hired at the fire department. And he said that because he is white, that he would not be allowed to get hired anytime soon. And he actually spent 7 years trying to get approved to go through the fire academy. During that 7-year period, he continued to have delays. But then when he finally got to the academy, he said, well, I was able to get an immediate approval for an African American woman who had shown up and said that she just literally got involved in the prior day. So more of the focus is on DEI initiatives and the racial composition of the fire force, rather than how many firefighters do we have trained, how many backup firefighters do we have. So the fire department in LA, woefully understaffed and focused on anything but public safety and saving structures. Number 5, another thing you can blame these politicians for, well, it's not the response to the disaster, it's how we fix those and make them whole who've lost everything, lost their homes, and been put in harm's way. And on that front, I have some bad news for the victims of this fire. California law may not even allow you to rebuild your home. You may not be able to get the approvals. And if you do, by some chance, get approved, it may take years, even decades. Yes. And here's why. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, and more importantly, in this zone that we've got the coastal zone. That's where Pacific Palisades is located, in the coastal area of Los Angeles. That means that the California Coastal Commission will be in charge of the rebuilding process. They will be able to deny someone from rebuilding their home, even if that home is substantially similar to the home that was destroyed, because it's the coastal zone. So there's an added layer of state bureaucracy and regulation and costs. I'm terrified for these people as they start down the journey of making themselves whole, because California law likely will not let them make themselves whole, preventing them from rebuilding a house that they lost in a wildland fire because of all the extra regulations. And don't even try to navigate Los Angeles building permit department. And remember, when you rebuild, they require all sorts of upgrades, very costly upgrades. They won't let you do defensible space to clear to save your existing home. But when you rebuild, oh, by golly, they got all sorts of ideas as to how we're going to fireproof your home at your expense, at a massive cost. Those are the 5 reasons why today, absolutely assign a significant amount of blame to these liberal politicians that have run our state and Los Angeles into the ground. They've created emergency situations 365 days a year so that when a real emergency does come up, we're not prepared. Number 2, they didn't do proper brush management. Number 3, they didn't manage their utilities, whether it was the electric utilities to turn them off so we didn't have sparks from power lines, to the water that was not even in the hydrants when it was needed. Number 4, the fire department is a complete woke mess in Los Angeles, where they just cut $17.6 million of staffing. Oh, but they put $1 million into diversity, equity, inclusion programs. Insane. And number 5, when these poor people come back to try to sift through the rubble and rebuild, the California laws, the regulations, the building permit process will make it a nightmare for them to rebuild, and it may actually prevent them from actually rebuilding. Look, at Reform California, we're leading the fight to expose these problems, to hold politicians accountable, and yes, reform the system. And I believe we start with reform by throwing the bums out. That's why I want you to go to our website right now, reformcalifornia.org, and sign up as one of our supporters so we can continue to bring news like this to you, even in emergency situations. Plus, check out our list of top target seats that we want to flip in the 2026 election. Yes, we're already starting candidate recruitment. We want to break the Democrat supermajority control of this state, and we believe we deserve a better governor than Gavin Newsom in 2026. Chip in a contribution while you're there. We are entirely funded by grassroots supporters like you. No big special interests back us because they hate us, and we wear that with a badge of honor. Go to reformcalifornia.org and join the movement. Until next time, I'm Carl DeMaio. Stay safe, chairman of Reform California and a California state legislator. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. But before you click away, please subscribe to this channel and click that notification button so you get updated when we post new episodes. Plus, like this video and share it with your friends so that we can help spread our message across the state. Reform California with Carl DeMaio is paid for by Carl DeMaio for State Assembly.